to a brand new podcast called A Link to the Cast. See what we did there? It's good. It's great, isn't it? Yeah. My name is Mark Robinson. You might have heard some stuff I've done before. You might have heard me in prior podcasts like Analog Shtick and Faces for Radio. This is a podcast about video games, as you can probably tell. To do this with me, I have the wonderful co-host from just across the oceans in Dave Ryan.
Mark, I'm utterly honoured to join you on this maiden voyage.
I think oceans might be a little bit too grand of a body of water, but you get what I'm talking about.
It barely passes lake status, really.
Yeah. And there's enough lakes between the two of us inland as well, with our sort of choices of weather. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about video games. We're going to talk about current games that are out, what we've been playing. We're going to talk about the news, because there's always stuff going on. Not all of it always good, currently. And as you can tell from our choice of words for what the podcast is called, we're going to talk about video games from our childhoods, or maybe not even that long ago, but if we kind of classify it as like a retro kind of game, or just a classic, we're going to talk about it, break it down, talk what we like about it, etc, etc. And yeah, Dave Ryan, start us off. How should we start with this?
Well, I think maybe we should set things off with what we're playing lately. Kind of set the tone. See what kind of mood we're in going into this podcast. I think.
Yeah, it's just kind of follow the format of like all other video game podcasts, other than Giant Bomb, where they usually talk for an hour about absolutely anything else.
Well, as I often say, the best ideas are stolen.
Yeah.
So let's completely abandon all pretense towards originality and just fire away.
Sounds like a grand idea.
So, what are you playing lately, Mark?
I've been playing Mario Kart 8, as I had been playing that a lot when it came out last year, and then I didn't play it for a while, and then the sneaky bastards brought out some DLC, and now I'm playing it again. You see what they did there? It's very clever.
Just when you thought you were free, they dragged you back in.
With the shackles and everything. But it's, I mean, I'm not one for DLC, it doesn't really do much for me. But the format, how Nintendo decided to release this DLC, giving us 2 cups, 8 tracks, and a couple of drivers towards the end of last year, and then doing the same thing just last week, or the week before last, in the last...
About 2 weeks ago now,
yeah.
I think, yeah.
But also with the free upgrade of the 200cc speed boost, or sort of new driving speed. It's fast. It's really fast. It's insane. It's crazy. I absolutely love it. I think that out of everything they've done, the implementation of 200cc is just the best thing they could do at this point. Because it's essentially an F-Zero game now when you play it in 200cc mode, which is what everyone's been clamoring for at this point.
It's probably as close as we will ever realistically get to another F-Zero game, because they're not fucked making one at this point, from all evidence. So... Yeah, 200cc. What I meant to ask you about 200cc was, now I'm not quite the proficient Mario Kart player that you are, and what I didn't learn until this new version downloaded onto my Wii U and I excitedly turned it on was that you need to get to the point where you've starred all the cups at 150cc to unlock the 200cc mode.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, I only knew this after the fact when I went, where the fuck is my 200cc mode? So I can look even worse in front of my friends when I play Mario Kart. And a cursory Google gave me the answer on that one. So how is the 200cc mode?
It's great. How many more stars do you need to unlock 200cc?
Look, I'm not going to lie, quite a few.
We'll leave it at that. I
have mastered 50 and 100ccs. 150ccs. It's coming along. I've got a couple of stars here and there.
Okay.
But,
well, there's your homework for the week.
Yeah.
It's distressingly fast. Now, I like to consider myself pretty good at Mario Kart 8 at this point, and I like to feel that I've mastered the technique of drifting, and really using that to its advantage. But fuck me, is it not enough? Because where before you could drift around one corner, get yourself straightened up, and kind of focus on where you're going next. With this, you need to pretty much have the entire map laid out in your head, because as you're drifting around one corner, you need to start drifting to go the other way, so you kind of cut across the corner you're already doing, drifting the other way to start dealing with the next corner. So any sort of chicanes that you deal with are fucking intense, to say the least. And really, to get 3 stars on any cup, you kind of have to drive a perfect race each time. And that's not taking into consideration the usual bullshittery that is other opponents and blue shells. It's not for the faint-hearted. I remember the first time that I went round a corner and I had to use the brake for the first time, and I legitimately hadn't ever used a brake up until I started playing in 200cc. I went to brake, and then I looked at my controller and went, what the fuck's the brake button? Found it, obviously, pretty quickly, because there's only so many buttons to work with, but it's completely thrown me off, because I'm having to sort of drift and then start to use the brake button, and that's such a alien technique that I have to do, and a button combination that I'm having to sort of relearn how to play the game, essentially. But it's good, and it's great, and certainly with the newer tracks as well, like Big Blue in 200cc mode. I mean, Big Blue is just, it's a fucking gorgeous track as it is, and it's good times. It's thumbs up. Yeah, it's definitely taken... I mean, you could have the arguments about what the best Mario Kart game is, and I think with this new mode and some of the newer tracks, I think it by far now has to be considered the best Mario Kart game, in my opinion.
It's certainly close. Like a half-decent battle mode wouldn't go astray.
You'd think, out of everything left to do, they would fucking figure that one out.
You think they've absolutely nailed the game. It's borderline perfect. And I was just going to say, like, in terms of kind of... Nintendo historically haven't really embraced the idea of DLC or the internet in general, I think it would be fair to say. But with the DLC packs, the way they've been doing it, the way they've been kind of incentivizing people to keep playing Mario Kart, don't trade it in, there's going to be more packs coming and stuff like that. They've been doing really, really well. And it just baffles me that at no point during the development of the game did they consider that what we were putting out in battle mode for Mario Kart 8 might be considered a steaming pile of shit.
Well, you think they would have been figuring it out for, I don't know, every installment of battle mode since the N64 rendition.
You'd think.
Yeah, I find it baffling, especially because we're at the point now where, you know, most people's online capabilities are at a point where we could probably play it pretty good. You'd think, you know, people would be just absolutely clamouring to... Well, they are to play online battle mode. You know, like, I'd gladly have a game with you and Jack and whoever else, and you know, just throw red shells at each other. That's all I want to do. I don't ask for much.
And crucially, not chat to each other. God forbid human beings ever talk to each other over the Nintendo network.
Yeah, and they actually make Block Fort the level of Block Fort and actually have it as it should be, and not whatever wanky rendition they did for... I think it was for the Wii version, or something around there. It wasn't very good. Either way, yeah, sort battle mode out, and then, yeah, best game ever, maybe. Might be a bit strong, but definitely
best game ever.
Yeah.
Weighty claim. You're just throwing it right out there. The first game we talk about on the first episode, best game ever. Straight in. I like it. It's ambitious.
Look, I'm black and white with these things, alright? I love you. Fuck off. You know, it's like that.
You commit, and I can respect that. What have I been playing now lately? I've been playing a few different things. I've kind of... With work and finishing up college and everything, it's kind of, I've been dipping into things here or there. There's nothing I've been like getting overly committed to. A couple of things I've been playing that I had some thoughts on. I downloaded the night it came out, as I was eagerly waiting for it, Axiom Verge on the PS4, which I'm just madly in love with.
Now, I need to ask, have you played Super Metroid?
I have.
Recently, or in the last 10 years?
Not recently. Last 10 years, yeah, I definitely say I've played it.
Okay,
not recently.
How heavy is it on the Metroid side of the Metroidvania comparisons?
Here's the thing, like, it's clearly the whole game, the whole premise of the game is a love letter to Metroid. It's very clear from the very start of it, when you boot up the game and the music starts playing and you go into the kind of the first area, that it's very, like, this game would not exist without Super Metroid. It's just, like I said, it's a love letter to the game. But who was it? I think it was Jeff Gerstmann's review of the game, where it kind of, by being so like Metroid in the early stages, you kind of then you play through the game and it gradually becomes less like Metroid. They throw in new mechanics. The music gets slightly stranger, changes somewhat. It's kind of hard to describe. There are a couple of weapons in it that I very much enjoy. There's a kind of, when you go through the stages, you go into different kind of areas. There are these kind of what look like dead pixels, almost like on a kill screen on an old arcade machine. And you eventually, if you get to a certain area, unlock this weapon that by tapping, I think it's R1. By tapping R1, you can use this weapon, fire it at the pixels, and all of a sudden platforms appear out of midair. Or if you fire it at enemies, enemies change behavior. So if they were firing rapidly, they suddenly slow down. Or if they were firing in one direction, they suddenly fire in another direction. This kind of a thing. Very much enjoying it. I can't quite tell how far I am through the game. Percentage-wise, in terms of like total completion, I'm not very far at all. But I felt like I've explored. I've spent a good, I'd say, the goods of 10 hours playing the game at this point, and it's just gorgeous. The music is brilliant. The environments look gorgeous. The whole thing is just, it's a throwback, but it's something different at the same time. That's basically it. It's a love letter to Metroid, but it's something new in and of itself at the same time, I found.
How does it control? Does it have, like, does it play, in terms of the combat, does it play like Super Metroid, or is it a little bit quicker? Because Super Metroid, I find, is it's a little bit more of a kind of thought process in that you really have to think about where you're shooting at and what you're going to be doing next. It's not just a kind of Contra style, just fucking shoot at everything, blow everything up kind of game.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's Contra quick. It's just, you can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's Contra quick, where it's run in and shoot everything as quick as possible, things like that. There is kind of, it's a bit slower than that. It's quick enough. The thing that I find bizarre about controlling the game is that it's weird playing a game that's very much in the Super Metroid vein and playing it while holding a DualShock 4. It feels unnatural to me. It's strange. It feels like I've gone into the Wayback Machine, and yet I'm still in 2015 at the same time. No, it's like it's quick. It's not too quick. Is the best way I can put it. It's good. It's great. I love it. Go on, yeah.
I was going to say, how do you feel having spent hundreds of euros to essentially play a game from 1994?
It feels odd, Mark. I'm not going to lie. When I bought the PS4, I didn't envisage that nearly 2 years later, the games I would repeatedly come back to are games that could probably run quite handily off a SNES. The likes of an Axiom Verge or a Mercenary Kings, or even Minecraft doesn't. It's not the.
You could probably run that off of like Windows 95 or 98.
You probably could. It's not the most technically advanced game, graphics speaking. But no, it's the PlayStation. The releases of kind of like proper, this is the next gen AAA kind of release for PS4. It's been slow. It's been plodding. Bloodborne is arguably the first of those kind of new generation AAA games that actually delivers on what it set out to do. But apart from that, it's been very sparse, and it's good to have these games coming out every so often, like an Axiom Verge. I have Shovel Knight downloaded there, but I haven't really dug into that yet.
I can tell you about Shovel Knight. I can tell you some stories. It's a grand old time. I was playing it on the Wii U, and it's too obvious to say it's kind of like Mega Man, because everything that's a 2D platformer of that sort of ilk is a bit like Mega Man, but it's actually a lot more indebted to the original Castlevania, because that is very much a slow, methodical, thought out. You really have to plan each attack that you're going to hit and where you're going to land, because a lot of games of that era, you have enemies and they respawn in the same place every time you kind of come out of a screen and come back in, and you have to really use that to your advantage, because a lot of times enemies are in particular places where you have to land on them to get to higher platforms, and there's usually secrets and whatever that you need to unlock. But because of the way the combat is, you don't use a projectile. You have like an alternative weapon that you can upgrade and change, which usually is a projectile. Your main attack, which is a shovel, it makes for kind of close combat, and so it makes the whole thing a little bit more intense. You can't just pick off an enemy at the other end of the screen. If you've got the magic and the alternative weapon to use, you can do that. But otherwise, you have to kind of get over there and take them on. It's very, very tough. But the kind of main boss battles, which are very much indebted to the Mega Man series, they're really, really good. Because, like, a lot of the boss battles in Mega Man can be over in about 10 seconds. Like, most of these in Shovel Knight take a good few minutes for some of the harder ones. And it's a very intense battle for all of them. It's a proper kind of mano a mano. And
I feel like you've been through something by the time you've beaten the boss.
oh yeah, like by the time I got to the end of the game, I hadn't been that frustrated in a good way through good level design and just good overall game design in probably since like Mega Man 9 and 10.
Challenged rather than frustrated.
Challenged, that's a good way of putting it. And yeah, it's my kind of game. Anyone that knows anything about me knows that I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. It's why it's killing me that I can't play Axiom Verge, because I don't have a PS4 and my PS Vita has disappeared off into Netherrealm or something. But yeah, you're gonna have a grand old time with that.
I think the last game I've been playing lately, and this, wait till you see this masterful segue here into the news segments. Other game I've been playing quite recently, as I texted you about the other day, is PT.
Mm-hmm.
PT, the playable teaser for the game that was supposed to become Silent Hills, the Hideo Kojima, Guillermo del Toro joint. And kind of playing through that, because this week it was announced that Silent Hills is no more, which is the latest in a string of borderline comedic announcements from Konami, that this game is no more. It's being taken down off the PS Store. If you don't already have it purchased and tied to your account, you will not be able to get it anymore. So there was frantic downloads. My activity wall on the PS4 there was full of people who had played PT for the first time, petrified that they wouldn't get a chance.
Then petrified when they played it.
It is genuinely might be the best looking console game. I know it's only a small teaser, but it's up there with the best looking console games I have ever played.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It is also, despite how brief it is, one of the best horror games I have ever played. It finally gave me hope about the resurrection of a franchise that I used to dearly love. Like, the first 4 Silent Hill games, you could argue maybe about the first one, the fourth one, maybe not so great. Depends on, your own tastes, really. But
I think everyone kind of argues at least that number 2, if nothing else, is a benchmark of that genre.
So, yeah, Silent Hill 2, for me, is the greatest horror game and one of my favourite games I have ever played. It is the only horror game. Normally I play horror games and don't really flinch. They don't bother me. But Silent Hill 2 got inside my head. And I had both a great time and a horrifying time. I seem to remember loaning it out to a friend of mine in school at the time, so it would have been in secondary school at the time, when I had Silent Hill 2 on the PS2, and telling him that he needed to keep a happy game beside him, because he would need to take breaks every couple of hours, just out of sheer dread.
It's the kind of thing that something like Parappa the Rapper is probably a good juxtaposition.
Well, when I think Silent Hill 2, I obviously the next logical step is Parappa the Rapper. I think my friend at the time, he played, was one of the early Jak and Daxter games. I think that was his bit of rainbow and kind of sunshine in his life when it had all been drained away by Pyramid Head dragging his sword around after him. But the franchise, I think we can all agree, however we feel about installments 1, 2, and 4, or 1, 3, and 4. Certainly took a dramatic dive off a cliff sometime after that, and has really, really suffered. The likes of Downpour in particular were just kind of horrible, horrible, horrible attempts at games. They did an HD reboot of Silent Hill 2, 3, and it was just 2 and 3 on the PS3, and somehow managed to fuck Silent Hill 2 up, which I didn't think was possible. They kind of, because the PS3 was more powerful than the PS2, they didn't feel the need to have the kind of fog to make an excuse why they couldn't render kind of assets further off in the distance. So they kind of removed a lot of the fog, which then in turn killed the atmosphere of the game. So they had gone back, despite succeeding with Silent Hill 2, they went back, not content to leave it be, and destroyed it. But when I played PT, and I think everybody had the same thing, where they watched the Sony conference at E3, where they announced this game PT, and they saw the kind of cringy, bit campy trailer of, the kind of the night vision camera of people playing PT and getting the shit scared out of them, and what the hell is this? Oh, I might download on the store later. And then you go to sleep, you wake up the following morning, you pull up Kotaku or IGN or whatever, and they go, no, you need to download this now. This is Silent Hill. and excitedly downloaded it. I played through it a few times, and it's just, especially now, kind of in the light of what's happening with Konami and the cancellation of the game, and Hideo Kojima kind of being sacked, kind of being shown the back door. It's just really sad because it was just so good, Mark. It was just so good. You had some experience with it, didn't you? You played a little bit of it.
I did. I'll be the first to admit, horror games anything horror related isn't usually my niche, because I'm a bit of a wuss, self-confessed. But something like that I had to definitely get involved with. PT, for me, if nothing else, is a sublime piece of viral marketing, and certainly took into account
absolutely,
the kind of new age YouTube gamer and the response to people playing games on YouTube in this whole kind of gogglebox sort of new age world we live in, which even I, being a part of it, I'm not really into the whole responses of people playing video games. I just want to actually play the fucking video game or watch the video game. But, the thing for me more than anything else is one of the biggest issues that Silent Hill, and certainly the later Silent Hill games, is that there is a very big difference between the way that the Japanese create anything horror related and anything that the West create that's horror related. They have very different mentalities and methods and techniques and approaches to doing it, and basically what I mean by that is they know what the fuck they're doing and the West kind of doesn't. And so you had just a bunch of cliched, quite boring. For me, the biggest issue that Silent Hill actually has is it actually works better in the whole reason that the original Silent Hill is the way it is because it was technically limited to what it could do, so that's why the fog was there. And just, the shiny and the sharper the graphics got, it actually takes away a lot of what makes Silent Hill, the griminess. For me, the reason that the first two Max Payne games work so well is because of the way they look. And so for the third Max Payne, they kind of completely turned it into something else almost. And a lot of people didn't like that, but I'm glad they did that, because there was no way they could take the core of what the original Max Payne was just because of the way it looks. And I feel a lot of that also is true about Silent Hill as well. But, and I think this is the big open question, is how the hell was Silent Hills going to be? And no one really knows what it was going to be. Because
we've no real idea if even the little teaser we got was in any way related to the concept for the game.
Exactly.
There's very little to no story in that little teaser, and we have no idea, apart from the fact that we know it would probably look similar, might have a similar feel. We know nothing about kind of how else the game would have played out beyond that.
And that is a great shame in itself, because, I read a lot of stuff about, is that going to work over a larger stretch of time? There was a big conversation about Alien Isolation, where people were saying that, in small dose, concentrated doses, that game was fucking perfect in terms of the tense and the horror, but over a whole game it kind of flags in places. And I was wondering if Silent Hills was going to play similarly to that, or if it was going to use what was in PT, or if it was actually going to be like a traditional Silent Hill game and be in third person. But it's we will never know now. And the hilarity of all of this is the fact that they said that Silent Hills has been cancelled, but, we will still be making Silent Hill games. And I think, if nothing else, this is probably about as damaging as it could be for the Silent Hill franchise, because I don't know what they can do with the series that is going to compare to what we had with PT, and everyone's just going to be like,
Where we're at now with Silent Hills is kind of even more bleak where we were before we knew about PT. Because where we were before we knew about PT was that we knew Konami was still a going concern. We knew more than likely there'd be a Silent Hill game eventually on PS4. We didn't know when, we didn't know what it was going to be like. Odds were, based on their track record around that time, it was going to be terrible. But then
they gave us hope.
They gave us hope. As soon as I heard Hideo Kojima, Guillermo del Toro, Silent Hill, I was like, this is going to be, win or lose, whether this is a great game, a terrible game, it is going to be the craziest roller coaster. Because look, Hideo Kojima,
he's a fucking madman.
Yes, Metal Gear Solid is a great franchise, but he is a crazy, crazy man. And Guillermo del Toro, brilliant director. He is a true fan of horror. He really is. He's been trying like hell. He is a jinx to anybody that's trying to make a game with him, because he was at THQ. Didn't he have a project going? Was it Insanity it was called? Where he's trying to make a game with THQ. That project was abandoned, and obviously we know what happened to THQ. And now we have this. One of the things that makes it especially depressing is that for the first time in a long time in a Silent Hill game, they seem to have nailed one of the things I thought was most important about the franchise's peak in Silent Hill 2, and that was they realized that the thing about the game wasn't like how fucked up the monsters were. It wasn't how much despair there is in the kind of the dramatic arc of what's going on with your protagonist or anything like that. The real thing about it is like it was the town in Silent Hill 2. The town was the real enemy. The town was twisting your mind and scaring the crap out of you, and it was the most important character in the whole game. And in all of PT, you don't encounter a proper enemy per se. I don't want to spoil the game for those people who have downloaded it at the last minute and haven't gotten through PT yet. But there's only one other being, you might say, I'm trying to be really vague about this, that you encounter throughout the teaser. And you don't really interact. You have no weapons whatsoever. You're properly, for the first time in a long time, I played a game where I felt completely helpless. You know, yeah. I was trapped in this house in what felt like a never-ending kind of Mobius strip. I didn't know what to do. The puzzles were very vague. The game was not holding your hand, which is something I think we've gotten very used to with the kind of the last couple of generations of consoles, is that if you're not doing well at something, or if you fail a couple of times, the game picks you up, dusts you off, holds your hand through until the next level. But this was anything but that. But it finally nailed the atmosphere and the helplessness, and the important thing to get about a Silent Hill game, to get it right, about a horror game in general, I suppose, you don't have to confine it to Silent Hill, is the atmosphere. It's how the game actually makes you feel rather than the challenges it puts in front of you. And that was the saddest part to me. It was like, I played that teaser when it came out, and I was like, finally they get it, you know? And now it's kind of just, it's all gone to shit.
Yeah, and I guess we can kind of seg that way into the bigger story out of all of this, which is Konami in general.
Yes.
The fuck is going on there?
Well, if we set up a timeline, people, I don't know whether it was on NeoGAF or wherever, started to notice that Hideo Kojima's name was being removed from a lot of Metal Gear stuff on Konami's websites. Konami then, I believe, issued a statement saying, no, nothing's wrong, no, it's fine, to only release a later statement saying that, you know, he's still employed, he's still going to make sure that Metal Gear Solid 5 gets to market, and then kind of they trailed off and got considerably more vague about what happens to him and his team after that. But the damning sentiment of the whole thing was when they said they were in the process of hiring a new team for Metal Gear. So obviously Kojima and Kojima Productions are going out the back door, and in are coming a new team. Now, if you'd asked me if at the time, I kind of thought to myself, well, look, Kojima himself has been saying for a long time that he wants to kind of finish with the franchise. I think the last two Metal Gear games, he said, he thinks he wants to make the last Metal Gear game and be done with it. And I think some critics of the franchise would say that it's arguably better off in anybody's hands but that deranged madman. But it's just that the way it was done was very uncharacteristic of how kind of a professional business should be run. He's kind of just shown the back door without so much as a kind of, thank you for all your work kind of thing. Then what happens is we start to hear rumors about, well, if Kojima's done with Metal Gear, is he done with Konami altogether? What's happening to this Silent Hills project that we've all been waiting for, that we're all eager to hear more about? Because since PT came out, we've really heard nothing about Silent Hills. We've all just assumed it's a going concern. It's in some stage of development. We don't know what. Like Guillermo del Toro, we don't know what the extent of his involvement was, but he had just wrapped a movie quite recently. It was a Crimson Peak, and he's on his way to go into pre-production on the next 2 Pacific Rim movies. So we thought to ourselves, okay, maybe it's somewhere along a stage of production where kind of we're going to hear something about it by E3 this year, maybe. So the concerns started to swirl that, right, if Kojima's not involved with Metal Gear anymore, is he involved with this game? And kind of rumors got to a point where I think it was last weekend or the weekend before, someone at a press conference, or not a press conference, at a film festival, asked Guillermo del Toro about it. And for the first time we got proper confirmation, where Guillermo del Toro himself said the game's not happening anymore and it breaks his greasy heart. That was followed up then by a tweet, I believe, from Norman Reedus, who was, I don't think we've mentioned this yet, but Norman Reedus, star of The Walking Dead, and the fantastically shit but brilliant movie Boondock Saints. He was going to be the protagonist in the game, from what we understand, based on the PT teaser. He tweeted something to the effect of that, he was sad that the game wasn't going to happen. Then things got even weirder, because, it's a few weeks of news regarding Kojima slowly being shoved out the door of Konami, and then all of a sudden, rapidly following these announcements about Silent Hill being cancelled, we have Konami delisting themselves from the New York Stock Exchange, which I think for anybody who's kind of like a fan of the IP that comes out of Konami was probably a concerning moment, because you wonder, is it something to do with the financial stability of the company or whatever? What did you think, Mark, when you heard about this?
I mean, I'm not big into my finance and that kind of thing. And for a start, it made me think, Konami, that thing, because Konami have actually been, other than obviously the Metal Gear franchise, they've been pretty quiet over the last couple of years.
It's pretty much it's Metal Gear and Pro Evo.
Yeah, and occasionally you'll get something that's Castlevania related as well, but I think kind of Castlevania as a whole hasn't really meant that much in some time, and people that actually are fans of Castlevania are probably going to flame me for that, but I'm just saying it as I see it. But yeah, you're right, it's pretty much they're down to Metal Gear and Pro Evo, and Pro Evo at this point, while the people that love Pro Evo, it's fair to say that FIFA is the main player in terms of football, and Metal Gear Solid, while one of the most infamous video game franchises it's still not that top tier peak of the franchises like your Grand Theft Autos and your Call of Duties, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that it's exclusively only appeared on PlayStation. Whether if they had before expanded that out, and obviously like the Phantom Pain's going to be on Xbox, but I think certain things like that, while I hold that dear to my heart, that you have your console exclusives, financially that may have really not been beneficial to Konami. I don't know where we are at the point now financially with Konami, but just all of these things that have happened lately, they don't seem like good things.
Now, one thing I will say from a financial point of view, this is me putting on the dusting off the old degree in economics and trying to take a stab at predicting something, but like delisting yourself from the stock exchange isn't necessarily the kind of, oh god, things are winding up, like we got to have a fire sale on all the IPs quickly before the place burns down. Sometimes it is part of a restructuring process, as I believe somebody pointed out during the week. I was reading an article that most of their business is conducted in Europe and Japan, and it does cost money to list yourself on the New York Stock Exchange, so it's possibly part of kind of a financial restructuring. Save yourself a bit of money because they're not doing that much business in North America on the stock exchange anyway, so it can be part of that. Also, you have this idea that Konami make their bread and butter at the moment through their kind of their mobile projects, their pachinko machines, things like that. And the kind of the nightmare scenario for a lot of gamers, I think, well, this is just my one, is that not necessarily that Konami will close down and cease to be a going concern. Because then, like, if the company closed down, they probably will, as I said before, have a fire sale on their IPs, kind of get rid of everything, get it out somewhere else. The nightmare scenario is that Konami pivots, changes the focus of their business, and rather than kind of sell off their IP and make a bit of money, they just sit on it. And they keep the Castlevania property, they keep the Metal Gear property, they keep the Silent Hill property, they keep any number. They own Bomberman as well, as you well know. They just sit on it for whatever money they might make in merchandise. Obviously, they've said they're getting a team together to make another Metal Gear game, but we'll see how that goes. Like, nowadays, making a big kind of AAA game for current-gen consoles is an expensive process. Like, you look at Destiny, a game that's kind of, it's a new IP, they tried to get it going, they want it to be kind of a persistent online thing, they want it to last for 10 years. It was something in the neighborhood of $500 million it cost to get that game to market. These are the kind of, like, not quite that extreme, but like you're talking about massive figures. And if Konami aren't kind of happy to make game development, as we know it, a priority going forward, like, that is the nightmare scenario, that they'll just kind of take Metal Gear, they'll take Silent Hill, they'll take everything, they'll just put it in a cupboard, and we won't hear anything from them.
Well, there is the statement that you could make that certainly, depending on where they might have gone with Silent Hill, now we don't have Silent Hills, that might be for the best. And I don't really have an opinion on Metal Gear one way or the other, because I've never been the biggest fan, but...
it's a whole barrel of crazy, Mark. You got to get yourself on board with that.
I'm aware of the crazy, don't worry. I've played enough to have experienced the crazy, but perhaps, depending on how the hell we get Phantom Pain in whatever shape it comes out, that maybe it might be for the best that is now finally kind of laid to rest, because it's a Kojima thing, and without Kojima, I don't really feel that should go on any further without him.
Yeah, it's like I said, like, the cynical among us might be glad to see a man that unhinged step away and see what somebody else can do with that lore, because the Phantom Pain is set to kind of tie up the last loose ends in the kind of the arc of Big Boss. So Kojima's story exists now as a whole. So what do? Do you reboot it? Do you kind of pivot off, take another character? What do you do with that franchise? So some people were kind of intrigued to see, like, what will a team that doesn't involve Hideo Kojima do with that franchise? Like, we saw, was it Platinum? They loaned the property out to do that Metal Gear Revengeance, which apparently was a massive barrel of crazy as well.
I have opinions on Revengeance. I mean, the name alone pretty much says everything that you need to know. It's 10 tons of crazy. I don't think it's a very good game, but just look, nanomachines, son. That's all you need to know.
But no, I think we'll kind of leave it on this, because we've been talking about Konami for quite a while. But I do share the concern that, like, it is Hideo Kojima's vision, and even if you might be interested to see what happens with Metal Gear when he's gone, is it really fair to the kind of the people, the fandom he's built up with the games, like him or loathe him, Hideo Kojima is all over that, all over that franchise. Yeah. It is nothing without him. He is the driving force behind Metal Gear the whole way through. He's brought it to the stage it is. So, like, is it fair to try and continue that without them and arguably bastardize his kind of vision for it? Or, like, in times gone by, maybe kind of out of respect for Kojima, they might have kind of laid the franchise to rest. But at the same time, looking at it cynically now in 2015, if there's a buck to be made off the franchise, they'll wring it for all it's worth.
Yeah. Well, we're going to leave that at that for the moment.
I think so.
Because otherwise we could be here for the rest of the evening.
Indeed.
So, Playtonic Games, a collection of individuals that once used to work for Rare, put out a Kickstarter for a game that was, or a project that was Project Ukulele, and now has been cleverly called Ukulele. I'm still working on if I think that's good or not. Either way, they put out a pledge that they wanted of £175,000 to bring Ukulele to Steam and whatever else they could kind of get out of it. Currently, they've made £1,255,000.
They passed the £175,000 sterling mark within 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And
now,
yes, as you said, now stand at over 1.2 million, with, I will add, 44 days remaining before the Kickstarter closed.
I get the feeling that some people wanted a game that was made by, the core of Rare back when Rare made games that people wanted to play. just putting that wild and crazy statement out there. And it's lovely to see. I'm curious to see exactly what Yooka-Laylee will be like, because I didn't play Banjo Kazooie when it first came out. I don't have the nostalgia kick with it that a lot of people do, that I imagine are the people that kind of got behind this project. I didn't play Banjo Kazooie till it came out on the Xbox 360 on its live market. And I do like it, and I appreciate what it is. I think that kind of collectathon type game doesn't hold up as well these days, because I just think you need to have so much more to hold a person's interest, and I just think there's just so much more that you can do with a game like that. So I'll be curious to see, just what Yooka-Laylee ends up being. But either way, it's really cool that, the simple fact is that if you think about Rare in the 90s, if you was to ask 100 people like their top 10 games, I would put a small sum of money that there'll be at least one Rare game within all of those top 10 lists, whether it's anything from the N64, your GoldenEyes, Project Darks, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Banjo Kazooie, or whether it's anything from the SNES, Donkey Kong Countries. It's just they could not do any wrong in the 90s, and then Microsoft bought them out, and they could not do any right besides Viva Pinata, which I fucking hope that we get something else from that series at some point. But it's lovely to see, and I hope that it's going to come out, and it's going to be whatever it is, will be whatever it is, but it's just good to see. I'm just happy to see that, so much money has been put into a project so quickly.
I know, it's amazing. Like, I come from a slightly different kind of perspective than you, because I do have that nostalgic value. I fucking love Banjo Kazooie. I remember distinctly a little story from Dave's youth here, that I went down to the local newsagent while my mum was in doing the shopping, and made them put aside a copy of the strategy guide for Banjo Kazooie for me. Therefore kind of haranguing my mother into having to buy it for me, because it had already been put aside. And pouring through these pictures from the game before the game even came out, and then being so excited to play it. And I loved it, and I played it over and over and over again. And I came back to it in the last couple of years, and for me anyway, at least, like, it could be part of that kind of nostalgia value that I see it through rose-coloured glasses, but it still holds up for me. And, like, let's not dance around it. Yooka-Laylee is Banjo Kazooie.
Oh, yeah.
It is, down to the logo. The Yooka-Laylee logo, it is not exactly a million miles away from the Banjo Kazooie logo. If you watch on their Kickstarter page, on Playtonic's Kickstarter page for Yooka-Laylee, about half the video is spent going, okay, yeah, no, in fairness, it is similar to Banjo Kazooie, but it's not as well. When you see two characters and one of them's a bigger character, one of them sits on the other's shoulders, and it's a winged character, it's Banjo Kazooie. The feel of the game, the music of all Banjo Kazooie, and I am absolutely fine with that.
The sound effects that Laylee makes is exactly the same as Kazooie. Like, I swear they just took that soundbite, that music file clip, and just ripped it straight out.
Even down to the limited kind of flapping animation is very similar. Obviously not as broad a wingspan or anything like that, but it is kind of it's so reminiscent of it, and it's such a kind of nostalgia trip. And look, I hope it comes out and it's great. I'm very hopeful for it. I know better in 2015 than to assume it's going to be fantastic. But when you pour through this Kickstarter page, and I suppose it is the goal of the Kickstarter page, it wants to make the game sound as great as possible. But when you hear things like about there's a whole section on this page about the soundtrack they're going to make for it, and just kind of dropping names left, right, and center, like some of gaming's greatest composers. So they talk about that they're going to have the composer from Donkey Kong Country on, the composer from Viva Pinata and GoldenEye. Like, these names, it stirs up the nostalgia, and I really want to succeed. I really want the throwback to that era of Rare, when, like you said, I think, like, if I were hard pushed not to sit down and come up with a list of my favourite games, you're going to find a fair few Rare games on there. But yeah, it's I'm really glad to see it. I don't know what I make of the whole kind of the idea of kickstarting games, because I know a lot of people have been burned in the past by projects that kind of got funded and then you didn't hear so much from them after that. But Yeah, no, hopeful at the moment. Cautiously optimistic, I would describe myself as being.
Well, I think it's fair to say that this will come out. I mean, the video footage that they've got, the gameplay footage that they've got already, after a short amount of time, I mean, it looks absolutely beautiful. It was created using Unity, which is a game engine that I even know a few things about. And I've got full hopes and a healthy amount of optimism that what will come out will be, it will be a completed game. It'll be, obviously, whether it's good or not will be the key thing, but they're going to really see this through to the end with the spirit of Banjo Kazooie in mind. And believe me, when I was saying what I was saying about Banjo Kazooie, that I don't have ill feelings towards the game. I did like it a lot, and I certainly think that if 13, 14-year-old me was playing it, I'd have absolutely loved it to pieces. I just didn't have that kind of nostalgic kick with me. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way things look about it. Any other bits of news that we need to quickly talk about before we?
Yeah, just a small couple of things. We'll breeze right through it. Just want to ask for your thoughts on this. We have in the last couple of weeks, we've announced that both Rock Band 4 and Guitar Hero Live are going to be hitting the shelves at some point in the foreseeable future. Now, Mark, I don't know about you, but I thought we were past this. I thought we had all grown up. We were past this, having to pay for a full price game and having to pay maybe twice the cost of the game again to get a set of plastic instruments that we'll all play for about 4 or 5 months, if that, have a great time, then forget about it. What do you think of the kind of what we know so far about the return of these peripheral fests?
Well, look, everything goes in circles, and we'd kind of burnt ourselves out with the kind of party music peripheral genre of video games. And don't get me wrong, that I fucking played the hell out of Guitar Hero and Rock Band back in the day.
Absolutely. Like, I think Guitar Hero 3 was one of the games I got with my PS3 at the time. And look, it was a great time for a little while, like getting through the game. Nothing compares to the first time you get your plastic guitar out, think you're like the god of rock, and play a bit of Knights of Sidonia. Look, it's a great time, everyone's having fun. But at the same time, as the games went on and just kind of nothing new was happening, and the one thing I will always say about Rock Band, and particularly now when we go into Rock Band 4, is that I believe it's confirmed that your DLC purchases for Rock Band are going to carry over to the new Rock Band, which I think is excellent. That kind of like to tempt people who might be lapsed fans of the genre, who kind of feel like they've been burned before, so like what's the point in having to buy new instruments and stuff like that, knowing that these people are going to be able to return and have like a full catalogue of music already at their disposal is quite cool. But I don't know, I'm just not entirely sold on it as a going concern anymore.
I just think the thing that those kind of games, they're not dependent on new generations of hardware and graphical upgrades. What you get from a Guitar Hero or Rock Band game is pretty much going to be the same thing out and out every time, and I don't see what advancements you can really add, what improvements you can add now that didn't already exist. I just think it's the case of, it's been a while since those games have really been front and center in the video game hierarchy and the upper echelon. And I just think that maybe they're thinking, we can kind of get back to where we were before and reach our glory years. But I kind of think of it like Ric Flair, thinking that he can return to, the prime of his youth, but really he's a 65-year-old man and in his underwear, and it's not quite as glorious as it once was. Yeah,
look, I like some of the stuff they've done with the revamp of Guitar Hero, and we'll start to wrap it up on this topic, because again, this is something we could talk about for a while, but I like some of the stuff that I've seen from the kind of preview videos of Guitar Hero 4, where like the display, the Guitar Hero Live, where the display looks very clean. They've redesigned the guitar, the plastic guitar, so there's 3 buttons on top, 3 on the bottom now. I like the way it looks. I like the kind of, a lot of people aren't sold on the full motion video as being in the background, but I think it's interesting what they're doing with it, that as soon as you start hitting a few bum notes here and there, that the crowd dissolves away and becomes a booing crowd and stuff like that. I think it's quite interesting, but honestly, for my money, I don't think it's enough for me to put down like over €100 to get a new Guitar Hero guitar in the game. So far, I'll allow myself to be impressed. If I see more stuff, I'm open to being persuaded, but I'm not so sure right now.
Yep, I'm more or less of the same feelings towards it.
Yeah, the final bit of news before we move on is, and this is something you didn't know before we went on air here, so I get to hear your reactions live to tape here. But there's a new Batman game coming out, Mark.
I am aware of that, yes.
Batman Arkham Knight, they're calling it, out in June. I believe it's the day I get back from visiting your good self during the summer. And it's supposed to be the conclusion to this trilogy of Arkham games, because I think we can all agree now that Arkham Origins wasn't part of that. This trilogy of Arkham games is coming out. People are excited for it. They're loving, get to play around with the Batmobile. Can't wait to see what these kind of games look like with the firepower of the PS4 and the Xbox One behind them. They announced the DLC this week, Mark.
Uh-huh.
The DLC for the $60 game.
Right.
It costs $40, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you getting for that, you might ask?
I'm asking, what do you get for $40 on top of your $60 game?
Allow me to tell you. You're getting character skins. Okay? That's starting off there. A variety of skins for Batman, Robin, Nightwing, and Catwoman. This is all coming from GameSpot, by the way.
Purely visual aesthetics doesn't, enhance the game in any way.
Indeed. Crime Fighter challenge maps, which I think is a standard for the series. You have the Riddler challenges and stuff like that, so a few more challenges, that's fine. Not worth $40, but whatever. Legendary Batmobile with themed tracks, so again, more skin-related things. So you're going to be able to skin the Batmobile as the whether it's the Adam West Batmobile or the the Tim Burton Batman movies Batmobile, whatever it may be. Then they're talking about doing some bits of story DLC. They have a thing here, Gotham City Stories. Now, they're only promising that for your $40, you'll get 6 months worth of this stuff. So whether they have more past that and they're expecting you to fork out another $40 6 months from now remains to be seen. The main interesting thing, I think, the one, if I'm honest, that they're trying to get the hooks into the Batman fans with, is this story, Batgirl: A Matter of Family, they're calling it, which I've described here on the GameSpot article as an all-new prequel story expansion in an entirely new location where you play as Batgirl for the very first time in the Arkham series. And included in this article is a first render of what Batgirl might look like in the series. And just before we I ask you your thoughts, are you familiar with the story of Batgirl in the comic books?
I'm more... What I'm most aware of when it comes to Batgirl is Alicia Silverstone in Batman and Robin, which I feel is not a fair reflection of Batgirl or Batwoman.
It would be fair to say that, all right. That is not a fair. That is not exactly the most accurate. Well, to sum it up, and not to bore everybody who isn't into comic books, basically, Batgirl is Jim Gordon's daughter, Barbara Gordon, who in a very famous book, a very famous comic book, The Killing Joke, which you might have heard of, she gets shot and paralyzed by the Joker. So what people are clamoring for is, because we know the character she becomes after she gets paralyzed, Oracle, who's a go-to person when Batman's in trouble to get information, to be monitoring Gotham, things like that. Because we know Oracle's in the game and Batgirl's in the prequel, what people are assuming is that maybe they're tacitly saying, without actually saying, that if you pay your $40 for this game, we're basically going to give you The Killing Joke, the game, if you get where I'm coming from.
Okay, yep.
What do you think about this? For a couple of bits of story DLC, we know nothing more than a couple of lines for each one and a load of skins. 2 months before the game comes out, they're saying, you know what, you've paid $60 already, give us another $40.
I could get angry about it, but the simple fact is, people have the ability to vote with their wallets, and that's the key thing when it comes to DLC. And the simple fact is, people do vote with their wallets, and they actually pay for this kind of stuff. And while we do keep paying for this kind of stuff, companies will keep doing this kind of thing. So while I do have my opinions that I'm not... We started this podcast, and I was praising Nintendo for their DLC that they brought out, but I feel that was done in a pretty respectful and well-crafted manner, and also didn't cost $40 or the equivalent. That was about 11 quid, I think, for me over here, and that gave me about half a game essentially of what Mario Kart is. it seems like a lot of money for the nonsense that you're getting. And now, to be fair, now you said that all to me, I have read the Killing Joke, and the idea of turning that into a game of some description is a pretty cool thing to do. But at the same time, you're like, I just want the fucking game that you've given me or are going to give me. We'll kind of worry about all that sort of stuff afterwards. Yeah, it's, I don't know. I mean, it does keep the interest. I think that it's in some way a marketing ploy, just to keep the interest drumming up about Arkham Knight. And in that instance, it's a pretty good thing to do. It's a pretty smart thing to do. I do think it is a lot of nonsense, though. But again, as I said, people have the ability to not pre-order and not buy DLC, but the fuckers are going to do it. So what can you do?
It's just as you said, I have my own opinions on it as well, and if we were to get into the kind of minutiae of it, we could be here all night. But I've personally only, or a season pass or anything like that, twice ever, and it was Mario Kart, obviously, as we spoke about earlier in the show, and Bioshock Infinite as well, a game I have an awful soft spot for. The Bioshock Infinite now wasn't $40, it was a fair whack less. I think I ended up getting it for €20 or something like that in the sale on the PS Store. But that now in itself had two substantial, large pieces of kind of additional story. Now, not the kind of additional story that you'd feel if I've completed the main game I need to get the full experience. It's stuff you could easily do without. But for fans of the franchise, it was fantastic because it broke my brain in new ways that I didn't think was possible after the conclusion of Bioshock Infinite. But there you have it. No, we'll leave it at that because I think there's an entirely larger discussion on kind of how we feel about DLC that we could accidentally stumble into, and all of a sudden it's tomorrow morning.
Yeah, agreed. Well, we will leave the news there, and we'll enter the final.
Mark, jump on the gun there for a second. I'm just going to run through just one very quick thing, and it's just a list of things that are coming out on PS Plus for this month. Just going to run through these, not spend an awful lot of time on these at all, because I realise we are running short on time, and you're eagerly waiting to talk about a game that has a special place in your heart. But going out on PS Plus this month for the month of May 2015, so leaving the store, or leaving the PS Plus offers, should I say, are Never Alone, Tower of Guns, Aru's Awakening, Dishonored, Killzone Mercenary, and Monster Bay. And in this month, we've got a fair few interesting games here. I had a look on the PlayStation blog there before we started the show and kind of had a look through a few of these games. We've got Ether 1 for PS4, which is from White Paper Games. It seems to be a very interesting puzzler. I'd recommend anybody that is interested, check out the trailer. It seems very strange. The premise of it seems to set out that there's two different tracks depending on how much you kind of want to get into it. If you just want the kind of the scenic route, you can just breeze through the game, do a lot of easy puzzles, but if you want to dive deeper, there's a much more complex route to the game. Looks quite nice. I'm very interested to play it when it comes out on the store on Wednesday. We've also got Ho Hokum, which everything I know about this game, it's for PS3, PS4 and Vita, tells me that it's probably what it would be like to be on acid for a considerable amount of time. It seems like the craziest, weirdest thing. I am not sure what the purpose of it is. It looks gorgeous, but it looks very, very strange. Very, very strange. It's like an interactive lava lamp. Then we've got, and I think it's a game that you have a soft spot for, Mark, Guacamelee Super Turbo Championship Edition for PS4 only.
Oh, for fuck's sake. It's a great game.
So you're a fan of Guacamelee?
I give full marks to Guacamelee. It's a fantastic game.
I'm very excited about that particular one. I actually never got the chance to play it because by the time I got my Vita last year, there was so much I had to play that I never got round to Guacamelee. And, well, now it's going out on my PS4 for free, so, suck it, Sony. Unfinished Swan is coming out on PS3, PS4, Vita. Then we've got Race the Sun, which is a very interesting kind of... you're a solar-powered craft, and you kind of have to race around obstacles and try and stay in the light so that you don't crash and burn and die. Very minimalist kind of art style to it. Looks interesting enough.
I actually reviewed the developers of that about a year before they released that for on Analog Stick back in the day.
Check it out, guys.
Yeah, it was very, very nice guys, and it's a very good game actually. Having played,
is
that.
it?
Yeah, it's really cool. I don't know if you've ever played there were, I don't know if you ever played like when you was in secondary school back in the day, and you was kind of in the IT room and you was faffing about on the internet, and they had the kind of game where it looks a little bit like Star Fox, and you it was like an endless runner, and you had to find a spaceship, and you had to avoid obstacles kind of, coming at you. You had to turn left and right.
Yeah,
it's kind of a little bit like that, but for 2015.
Yeah, that's very much what it's like. But it looks nice. The minimalist art style looks very good, and again, another one that it's free. I'm going to play it.
Yes.
Like, let's be honest here. And then the final one is Murasaki Baby is coming to the Vita. So that's your PS Plus lot for this month. So I think we will hand it over to Mark, who has the first edition of our book club here on the show.
Yeah, well, this podcast is called A Link to the Cast, so it would only be fair that we start with The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, a game that I hold near and dear to my heart. And it's the game that, when you use the term a timeless classic with air quotation marks, it's the game that I would bring up. For a game that was released back in 1991, it still holds up now, both visually and in terms of its actual gameplay mechanics, because a lot of the stuff from that game is still used today in Zelda games that come out now, and also in other games that are highly influenced by it. And that's pretty remarkable for something that came out 25 years ago or so, or thereabouts. And it's a game that I can just pick up, I'll play it through once a year, once every 2 years or so, because it's just so immediately accessible. And a lot of it is that kind of nostalgic kick, but I think it's one of those games that anyone who hasn't never played a Zelda game, you could easily just hand that to them and let them go off for the weekend and have a grand old time. And, you can do that with a lot of Zelda games, but that whole kind of timeless classic thing, you can make the argument about what the best Zelda game ever is, and it's not my favourite Zelda game ever, but that you compare that and Ocarina of Time, and I think Ocarina of Time, the original, not the remake, hasn't aged as well because it was in that early transition of 2D to 3D gaming. But with A Link to the Past, just the way that it looks, it just still looks as glorious now as it did back in 1991. Just has a really, really nice art style to it. The music is, it's ingrained in my head now, but it's got some classics that, Nintendo still use and twist and turn into new versions of it to this, kind of current day. And, its original core inception, it was going to be on the original NES, but got moved over to production or development for the Super Nintendo. There's a couple of small differences between the original Legend of Zelda and A Link to the Past. It's not as open world as the original Legend of Zelda. It's got a slight more kind of linear flow to it, but it's still an open world, and that's still pretty kind of mind-blowing for 1991 and playing it back then, I'd imagine, because I didn't play it then because I'd have been 3 years old, but I imagine for games of that time, just this kind of open world to explore, and just how glorious and beautiful it looked, and all the secrets to uncover. I'm gushing now.
It's straight, like you do, and it's very similar to what I think a lot of people in our generation have, is that like the game in terms of when it came out, 1991 in Japan, 1992 North America and Europe. It's interesting that kind of it was before our time because we were toddlers, and yet I think in my memory it's probably the first game of the SNES era that I was able to go back to. And there is this problem for a lot of games where when you try to go back, you highlighted the problem of the 64-bit era, that there are just games that just don't plain hold up. Like at the time, sometimes, like obviously, and a lot of gamers who kind of saddle a few different generations when they've been playing for a while have the thing where they go back and they look at a game they played years and years ago and they go, I thought this was the most realistic looking shit when I was a kid, and now it looks awful. But A Link to the Past is one of the first games where I went back. I didn't own a SNES at the time. My first console that I owned with my own money, well, I say my own money, it was money I got from my communion, was the N64. So when I eventually got a SNES from my auntie when she kind of was getting rid of hers, and I went back to play Link to the Past, it was the first game from a previous generation that I think like it absolutely thoroughly held up for me. Just and like you said, it still holds up. Like in 2015, you can throw that game on. It is still accessible. It still looks fucking beautiful. The music, the colors, everything about it is just, I don't want to say timeless, because we don't know, 20, 30 years from now what gaming is going to be.
It's
but
fucking
it's as close
timeless.
It is, yes, it is as close to timeless as we can possibly get, really. Like, you know what I mean? There are a few games I can think of that you could put on a level playing field with Link to the Past. It's damn near perfect. It's a brilliant game. Talk for a minute there about it, because you kind of alluded to it there briefly. The Koji Kondo soundtrack to the game, the composition.
I don't know what you could really say about it that you can't really read about, but
I flummoxed you here.
You've thrown me on the spot there. Like, there's a few bits of music, like the Dark World theme.
These are my Paxman questions to find out your commitment. You've never played the game at all, Mark.
I mean, like, yeah, the Dark World theme is phenomenal, and we need to get that back in some form or fashion. But just the main theme itself, the overworld theme, obviously it did exist on the original Zelda, but it's kind of the sort of main version of that theme that I think most people remember. And the simple fact is you hear that fucking theme for most of the game, because you're outside for most of it, but you never get bored of it. And every single time you hear it, you're like, right, fucking, we're going on an adventure now, let's fucking do it.
It goes some way to describing how brilliant a game soundtrack from that era must be, that in 2015 there are people who will pay not small sums of money to go see an orchestra perform this music live.
Yeah.
That it
I'm one
actually
of those people.
Translates, like when you think about, like, there are memorable video game themes and soundtracks from that era and before, themes and whatnot, but the fact that, like, the Legend of Zelda Orchestra is a thing, like, it really, like, highlights the legacy of this game, and obviously other games. It's not the only Zelda game that we hear in orchestral form. It sounds beautiful, but it's amazing that a game from 1992 the soundtrack from it finds a new life in a kind of orchestra. It constantly amazes me.
Yeah, and for me as well, like, what has really become apparent, so I'm currently doing this really dumb thing where I play every single European Mega Drive game because I clearly hate myself. But playing is a number of games from that era, and even the games that are a couple of years older than A Link to the Past, and they fucking pale in comparison graphically. And I mean, there'll be people that will make arguments between Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo, but I mean, you only have to look at, like, the Sonic games to see what the Mega Drive could do graphically. But it's just astonishing just seeing how fucking horrendous some games looked at that time, and seeing, what A Link to the Past was like. And to be fair, there are a number of games sort of in the early 3D era that look pretty fucking horrendous, but something like Super Mario 64 still holds up pretty well now. And it's just a mastercraft in video game design. And some of the puzzles, to this day, I still get kind of flummoxed by a couple of puzzles every now and again. Yeah, it's just, I was hoping I was going to come into this and be a little bit more, talk a little bit more theoretically about the game, but I can't help it when it comes to this. I tend to get a little bit more just, oh, it's really good, go and play it. And the fact that, I can just fucking have it welded against my face and play it on my Wii U pad is just, it's the greatest thing ever.
It didn't invent the wheel, it perfected the wheel. And if you look at any kind of open world adventure game nowadays, your Elder Scrolls are the ones I'd naturally go to in my head. You don't have trouble making the connection there that Zelda, and perhaps particularly Link to the Past, had a mighty hand to play in inspiring the whole genre. And, like, look, Skyrim, quite popular from what I'm led to believe. So it's the news
doing the rounds. It's what I've heard.
Indeed, it's a testament to just how important the game is for the whole industry, really.
I completely concur. And I think, before we gush anymore and make people start to vomit in their mouths, I think we should leave it at that for the time being.
I've been thinking, Mark, that for when we do these book clubs, and kind of what we're going to do, I think we discussed before, is that kind of every week one of us takes a look at a game and kind of like we said, a vocal love letter to the game as part of this segment.
Yeah.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Babe Ruth, and I'm going to point where I'm going to hit the ball. I'm going to, before our second episode, if such a thing should happen, I'm going to tell you what our book club is going to be. So hopefully anybody that might listen to this will go away, have a catch up with the game in question, and we'll have a conversation about it the next day.
I like that. That sounds good. I'm down with that.
In true book club fashion. So what I'm doing here is, because I was appalled at your lack of sentimentality for the game, the one I'm going to, because it's quite topical, the game I'm going to go with is Banjo Kazooie for the N64.
Okay, that works for me.
So we'll go away, we'll have a play of that, and for an episode 2, we shall talk about Banjo Kazooie and, many stories of me trying to wrangle strategy guides and the like.
I very much look forward to that.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Well, for anyone that has taken the time to listen to this, I appreciate it very much. There will be an episode 2. I promise you that right now.
Excellent. Because I was kind of wondering if, as soon as we end the recording here, you'll just go, well, that was shit. I never want to speak to you again now.
Believe me, if anyone was letting a side down,
what the fuck is this Mick over here talking about? What?
Trust me.
I thought we put to bed centuries of cultural tension to talk about our love of video games, but whatever.
I hadn't even taken into consideration the UK Irish connection sort of thing here. I thought that wouldn't even needed to be something that would need to be brought up.
Well, you see, it's all in my head at the moment, because in a kind of spoilers to what I do, I teach history, and lately I've been teaching a load of rebel songs in my classes that have not great things to say about your fine people. I personally have no problem with, but these songs seem to have quite a bone of contention.
Believe me, after the news of the last 24 hours about a fucking child being born, I don't have a lot of great things to say about my country at the moment, so it's fine.
Anyway, sure. Well, it's good to know that you don't quite hate me after this.
No, I could do that. Anyway, we'll carry this conversation off air. Thank you very much for listening to A Link to the Cast, and we'll see you again next time.